Hello, this is Eddie Yoon. I'm the founder of the think tank and advisory firm on growth strategy, Eddie Would Grow. I'm here with Mike Eardley, who's the president and CEO of the IDDBA, the International Dairy, Deli, and Bakery Association. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Eddie.
I also should thank you for having me speak at your show last year in Anaheim at the IDDBA last June. That was a wonderful time. I really appreciated the chance to talk, but even more, I was excited to hear your own story about how you were introducing the concept of superconsumers, which is the talk that I gave and the book that I wrote. But you gave this amazing story about your journey of how you became a super consumer of a certain brand of sneakers. So I would love for you to just retell that story again because it was so fascinating the first time.
Sure, I'd be happy to. This is audio, not video, so you can't see me. For the people who saw me up on stage, they wouldn't guess that I'm a runner. I'm an old man and I'm very overweight. Surprisingly, though, I am a runner. And after being challenged by both my daughter and my sister, I started running. And I've completed more than a dozen races, most of them half marathons. For the non-runners listening, a half marathon is 13.1 miles.
Mike, that would be me. I am a non-runner, and I find your story amazing. I'm curious, you said it was your wife and your sister. Are they runners themselves?
Actually, my daughter, my sister's actually done a couple full marathons.
Wow. Do you know how they started running, out of curiosity?
I'm not exactly sure who challenged them to start, but they've been at it for quite some time. My sister's quite a bit younger than I am, and of course my daughter is too.
Yeah. That's amazing that they started running and, presumably they got challenged or something got into their system and then they challenged you. Like, how did you feel when they challenged you? Just out of curiosity.
Well, when I saw people running 13.1 miles, I thought, boy, how do you ever do that? But I found there's a lot of help on the internet and there's a lot of people to support you and train you to move forward. But I still got to tell you, 13.1 miles, that's a real long way for somebody my size and my age.
Well, kudos to you, and that's amazing. I mean, I just think it's a testament to where there's a will, there's a way, and clearly you have the discipline and the chutzpah to get that done. So, can you talk about how it was? Did you take to it right away, or did it take some time, or what was it like starting out?
There's nothing about it that's easy, but it kind of gets to my story. Is you learn really quick the importance of having great shoes. And particularly for somebody like me, who's not an ordinary runner. And that's how I met New Balance shoes. They're a tremendous American company, and they make a lot of athletic shoes, and most of them are made here in the United States, but they really focus on specialty markets. I am a specialty market for a runner. They're not traditionally as fashionable or hip as they are practical, and they're pretty much the only company that makes shoes for people my size and people my age. Pretty small market, and because not many runners look like me.
How did you find New Balance in the first place? Were they the first brand that you tried out, or did someone make a recommendation to you?
Funny thing, when I started running, it was out on the streets of San Antonio, and I was stopped for a moment trying to get my oxygen back, and a guy stops, and he looks pretty much like me, and he says, "Tough day, isn't it?" It was 90 some degrees. I told him yes.
Wow.
And he said, boy, he says, if it wasn't for these New Balance shoes, I wouldn't be out here. And that's the first time I heard it. And then I went out and found some.
Mike, that is an amazing story because first, it sounds like you were kind of challenged by, as you said, your daughter and your sister, who are both runners. So they're kind of super consumers of shoes themselves, as I've heard you talk about the amount of shoes that you go through. And it doesn't sound like they made a brand recommendation to you at that time of shoe, but just a random complete stranger that you met who had the same kind of energy and discipline and kind of, I would not have the guts to go out in San Antonio to start my running career there. So that's amazing. And so he just found you, which is one of the things that I often say in the book is how super consumers are kind of birds of a feather that flock together. So he immediately saw you, kind of probably saw himself in you, and because you were kind of on the same mission, wanted to help you along. What was your reaction to his piece of advice there?
Well, I went out and looked for the shoes and found a shoe store that sold New Balance in San Antonio, and once they have a very great sales organization of people who really work with you and don't judge you on your appearance, but really find you the best shoe that works for you.
Do you remember the store that you went to?
It's actually a New Balance store
A
on
New
the
Balance store, huh?
northwest side of San Antonio.
Which actually makes me wonder if how intentional it sounds like they probably were about the intimidation factor, especially, there's probably no more valuable customer to them than somebody who is not a runner, but wants to start, but doesn't know how. And, regardless of kind of who you are, like the idea of kind of approaching somebody who is, looks like they run ultra marathons all the time. Like I would run scared from the store and not even want to show up. I'd want to just buy it online or do something anonymous. But like, it sounded like they must have had some training, I don't know, to make you feel welcome and not be intimidating.
Yeah, I don't doubt that a bit. They were runners themselves, but they were not judgmental, and they were very interested in making running as painless as possible for me, and I assume for everybody else that comes in there.
Honestly, it makes me want to go to that New Balance store in San Antonio just because of that, your recommendation there. That's great. So they got you hooked up with, what was the first pair of New Balance you got?
Well, I started buying their model 1123s, and really, I'd go through about two pair of those a year, and they're $150 a pair for the shoes. But each pair lasted about 600 or more miles, and I really loved them. However, then a couple years later, in their wisdom, they replaced my 1123s with a new and improved version, which was their model 1540s, and those were $165 a pair. Bad part of it, the shoe was great, but for me, they only lasted around 300 miles.
Oh,
I was impressed with the shoe, but I wasn't impressed with the value. So I used social media and I told the story on New Balance's website. Amazingly, they didn't get defensive. They responded to me and said, you're right. Contact us. We're giving you a free pair of 1540s.
wow.
When they sent them to me, they said, please send us your worn out ones in. We want to take a look at them and maybe work on the engineering to make sure that doesn't happen for one of our other runners. The funny thing is the free ones still only lasted about 300 miles. And I'm thinking, hey, this isn't going to work. And then all of a sudden along comes a package, and it was a new pair of 1540s, but it was their version 2. And a little note inside said something to the effect of, please try these improved shoes and thanks for helping us make them right. Once I got that, I said, I'm not even going to look for any other shoe. I don't think I'll ever buy anybody's shoe because they care about me. And that's what made me a New Balance super consumer.
That is an astounding story, Mike. I'm hard pressed to think of how many companies actually have, as you described, the lack of judgment for somebody who's trying to enter the category and is a little bit afraid or intimidated. But I think to your point, that lack of judgment, which I think must stem from some sort of humility or openness or kind of care for the consumer, that's really not just words on a wall, but actually lived out in how they train their people. But is this a commonplace set of corporate behavior that you see across a lot of companies?
I really don't think so, Eddie. And, the neat thing is when you find a place like this, you start telling everyone about it. And obviously, I'm telling you today, but I sold a lot of people on New Balance shoes since then. And also the shoe store that I purchased them from, including my daughter. When she comes down and visits us in San Antonio, I like to take her and buy her new set of shoes. And she had never used New Balance and doesn't really need the same model I do, but she enjoys them. And like she says, once you run in those, you aren't going to go back to another pair. But it's getting you in the door, showing us that they care about us as consumers, and then making sure we're taken care of. It's a great company.
I have to imagine that if New Balance, if there's some sort of a finance whiz at New Balance and they were calculating the lifetime value from Mike Eardley, if not just the shoes that you buy, but the number of converts that you've driven to the store, but to this, even for now, like what's interesting for me, Mike, is that, I am not a runner. We just had some friends of my wife over that ran a half marathon just right around our house just this past weekend. And, it's something that I'm inspired by your story. I was inspired last year, but sometimes, life gets in the way. But I am inclined to want to see if I can pick it up because, I think you're giving me the inspiration to see if I can do it. and had the greatest experience with running or jogging and I do think that some of it's the shoes. And even though I heard your story last year and we were intending to do this, like for whatever reason, it's just that reach and frequency. So I now need to go out and get some New Balance shoes, but not only do I want to buy some, I want to actually go to a store to see if I can have the same experience that you did. So I think just the amazing lifetime value that you get. I mean, you just imagine that the free pair of shoes that they sent you, probably one of the best investments that they made as a company.
No doubt about it. And when you talk about me running, you have to remember I'm not up there with the Kenyans, and my times are never that strong. But as my sister always says, hey, there's not too many guys your age that are out here running it, and she says you always finish.
I think that's the part, is you finish the race that's ahead of you. In many respects, I do think that you wonder how much bigger could the category be if they were able to fully convert the people out there who would benefit from the running, who probably have the discipline and I think the energy and the mental fortitude. Because you tell me, but I know a lot of it's physical, but a lot of it has to be mental. But there are the people that are out there that may not consider themselves to be runners, but how much bigger could the category be if people hearing your story would be able to convert and say, yes, I can do this too. And Mike's my inspiration for it. And you know what? New Balance is going to be my muse to pull this off. Like I would imagine that category could grow significantly because of that.
I think you're right, Eddie. And just to help everyone out there, just get out there and do the first mile and then the second mile. And each one gets easier as you go along. I'm not saying it's always pain-free, but you'll feel better for it at the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then my last question that I have for you, Mike, is out of curiosity, one of the things that I found in my research about super consumers is that if you are a super consumer of one category, you tend to be a super of 9 others. Certainly your daughter and your sister challenging you to run, has converted into a running and a New Balance super consumer. What are the other categories or brands that have kind of also benefited from your newfound passion for running? Does any other come to mind?
Eddie, I'm passionate about just about everything that I touch, but the two that I mentioned last year, I think are still appropriate. One being tequila and the second being cheese. And I have to run because of those two.
And I assume those categories are not your pre-running routine, but it's your post-race routine there, right?
You're right, Eddie.
Well, I think this comes full circle to, I think, what we'll talk about at the show in New Orleans in June 10th through the 12th is one of the things that is kind of an ironic part of like the people that are coming, the retailers that are looking at new products, for them to think about how do you grow the grocery business, which has suffered from a decline in trips over the last 10 years or so. Is ironically, getting people to become super consumers of running and using New Balance to help them out there might actually be the very thing to help people consume more products in the deli and the dairy and the bakery section there.
Well, I'll meet you out there. We'll do a run, Eddie. We'll start at getting everybody going.
You know what? You're on. I'm inspired by your story. Thank you so much for sharing it, Mike. It's really quite remarkable what you've done here with it. And I hope that not only are other runners inspired, that New Balance gets the kudos that it gets, but also, the people that are attending the show can understand the origin story of a super consumer and the net benefits that they can have for everybody beyond just running, but tequila and cheese too. Thanks so much, Mike.
Looking forward to it, Eddie.